Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is so great to have you here for the second event as part of our week of events, the speaker series, The Next Gen Policy Change. I'm Dr. Elise Stevenson. Today, we're here to talk how to tackling the big issues in society. Some issues, whether environmental, social, or otherwise, can seem insurmountable. Whether that's from climate change to mental health, youth inclusion, economic recovery, or more. This session's really about generating ideas, having cool conversations with leaders in our region to generate the ideas around how can we build back better after COVID-19. We are aimed at schools and students, but this event is for everyone, regardless of your age, your background, or where you come from in the region. We really want to hear from the people who are leading at the forefront of change in their communities or at a national policy level. But without further ado, as a co-founder of Social Good Outpost, a researcher at Griffith University and the curator of this speaker series, I'm really thrilled that you've decided to join us today. This speaker series was started by Social Good Outpost, which is an Australian design and strategy studio in 2019. And the reason was because we really believed that young people across Australia and our region had a really important role to play in deciding, well, where do we go next? What should our foreign policy be? What should our domestic policy be? And actually, what should our lives look like into the future? Since 2019, we've run just over 50 events with almost 4,000 individuals across Southeast Asia. We believe that there are big issues out there in the region and the world, and we need to collaborate in order to solve them. We try to both be a platform to promote young voices in international affairs, as well as providing the wider community with an opportunity to learn from and collaborate from an intergenerational and cross-cultural community. We are very lucky to have collaborated with two very important organisations in the building of this particular event. Firstly, the Australia-ASEAN Council, which was launched in 2015 to generate opportunities for Australian business, education, science, innovation, and the arts to work across our counterparts in Southeast Asia. The mission is to increase knowledge and promote our interests in Southeast Asia by initiating and supporting activities to enhance understanding across the 10 ASEAN, or Association of Southeast Asian Nations countries. So Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. It's a really big region and a really cool one too. Secondly, we also want to thank Griffith University, who's one of our core partners in delivering this event series. We partnered up with Griffith in the lead up to the Business Innovation and Improvement in Government Conference, which is being held from the 16th to 17th of February in Brisbane to bring an intergenerational and innovative way to understand and explore the big policy, social, environmental, and other issues in our region. Why? As a values-led university, Griffith has been at the forefront of research, learning, and teaching around big business, government, environmental issues in our century and beyond. We're really honoured to have partnered with the Policy Innovation Hub in particular, a platform that connects leading researchers with government to solve complex problems, as well as Griffith Business School for holding this series. But first, we're actually here to share, inspire our communities, learn and collaborate. And in the spirit of this storytelling, I'd really like to acknowledge the millennia of such sharing that has gone before us and acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging of the lands on which I gather here in Brisbane, the Turrbal and Yagara people, as well as acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands from wherever you are gathered today, whether that's across Southeast Asia or Australia. We all have a role to play in our communities, in connecting with our history, as well as forging our future together. Now, a few housekeeping rules. Please keep your videos and microphones off for the duration of this panel, but we really want you to ask questions. So write comments in the chat, questions, be curious and learn. Feel free to engage with our panelists, and we're definitely going to have a session at the end where you can ask questions directly. Now, you may or may not know that this event is just one of 5 signature events this week, part of Next Gen Policy Change, and we'd really love you to be part of them. Tomorrow we're holding ones at 6 p.m, some masterclasses on everything you want to know from policy entrepreneurship to entrepreneurship proper, as well as in the future looking into projects around design thinking and where do we go from here? We know what the issues are, what's next? Last night, we had our first opening event and we discussed everything from the current conflict in Myanmar to dealing with mental health during COVID, racial injustice, climate change, and gender inequality across the region. Today, we're here to learn from everyone from all sides, whether diplomatic to grassroots and the various ways in between that we can pioneer change. So I'm joined by three very special speakers today, and I'm just going to briefly introduce them because actually these people, they tell their stories better than I can. But to start with, I want to welcome Australia's High Commissioner to Brunei Darussalam, Tiffany McDonald. Tiffany is a career officer with the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Australia. She's previously served overseas in Seoul, London, and Jakarta. She's a really phenomenal diplomat in our region and has been pioneering some really interesting ways that Australia and Brunei can work together. We're also joined by Hayley McQuire. So Hayley is passionate about supporting young people to be critical and active drivers in our educational ecosystem, where Indigenous ways of knowing, being and doing are embedded and tied to both the aspirations of both Indigenous nations and our young people. Hayley is a former Australian representative on the Youth Advisory Group for the United Nations Global Education First Initiative. She's a former UNICEF Australia Youth Ambassador, and also a presenter on Deadly Vibe on Radio 4 US in Rockhampton. So super, super cool. Finally, I'd like to welcome Fisha Rashid, who is the founder of the Big, how do I pronounce this, Fisha? BWN Project, hold on. I'm going to unmute you right now.
BWN Project.
Perfect. Who's also an entrepreneur and innovator with a legal background, experience in youth, community development, and has done everything across from supporting Brunei's women entrepreneurs to youth economic projects and local empowerment. So that's a brief introduction, but I just wanted to ask all speakers, you've been involved in policymaking, entrepreneurship, community building to some degree or other. To start with, how did you get to where you are today? What is it you spend most of your time working on? And what sparked your interest in social or policy change to begin with? And I'm going to call on the wonderful Tiffany McDonald. Would you mind kicking us off right now to answer this first question?
Thanks, Dr. Elise, and hello to everyone. It's a real honour to be here talking with you all today. And as we are accustomed to doing at the High Commission in Brunei, I want to also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet and pay my respects to their leaders past, present and emerging. I also want to acknowledge people from all race, ethnicities and sexuality. They're all welcome at the Australian High Commission. So my job is, as the Australian High Commissioner, to represent Australians and Australia internationally. So it's a really big, broad banner under which I operate, but I'm really passionate about representing Australia's interests in our region and globally. And I've had the privilege of working as a diplomat in a number of countries now. And I'm really also very committed to making sure that what we do as diplomats connects to the public that we serve. I'm really keen to make sure there's a direct line of sight between the work that I do and the Australians that we serve, whether it be in Brunei, where I'm representing Australia now, or whether it be in Australia or elsewhere. And for me, this passion for representing Australia was really sparked when I was a young girl and travelled to the United States as a 10-year-old and spent some time in school there and realised what a great country the United States is, of course, but also what a great country Australia is, and recognising the differences between the way we operate, but also just the story that Australians have and the contribution that we have to promoting a safer, secure, prosperous region were the things that really ignited my passion in international relations. And the idea that I could live and work in a country and really get to understand it and the people in that country was the thing that attracted me to a career in diplomacy.
Yeah, that's super cool because I think that so many young people across our region, we are actually very connected, and at least prior to COVID, we had some relative opportunities to travel. So I think that your story will resonate more broadly there. Fisha, can I ask you too, because I know that you've also lived, worked all over the region and the world. What was it like for you? What do you spend your time doing right now, and how did you get here in the first place?
Hi, everyone. It's a good honor for me to be here to share a bit of what I do in Brunei. So, how I got here was mainly because I think I was driven by the fact that a lot of my friends were being unemployed. And I wanted to create a really fun way on how we could, be more self sustainable and how, just to create more opportunities for people. And I think that was one of the biggest drives of what I do today. And a lot of what I do, so what I spend my time doing on nowadays, I spend quite a number of hours at our community development center working with the community in the water village, trying to find different ways on how we can empower them from getting out of their whole poverty lines, and trying to boost their socioeconomic lives. And I think that's about it. And apart from that, trying to maintain our nationwide initiatives. We've got quite a number of campaigns that's currently ongoing as well within the country, and we're hoping to do more change within this year in Brunei.
And Fisher, can I ask you another question there? Because I went to Brunei first time about 2 years ago now, and
Yeah,
all about the water villages. Can you
yeah,
describe what this is like? Because a lot of our audience in Australia, for instance, or in other parts of the region, might not be able to conceptualize just how amazingly
yeah.
tropical and diverse and interesting Brunei is.
Yeah, definitely. So actually, you know how there is this huge misconception that everybody in Brunei is very wealthy, that we all live in gold houses and everybody has 10, 20 cars at home. Um, I do believe that we do have a very high GDI where, which actually contributes to that misconception. But there is a very huge contrast between those who live on the land and those who live on the water. So the water village is actually a very beautiful place. It's so filled with culture. It's a really amazing place where you go and you get to experience life from a total different view. And on land you have everybody who's pretty much in their own bubbles, and you have people in the water village who are still living in wooden houses and still having to run small businesses and do a lot of village industry businesses, and just trying to make living through that. And I think a lot of people just don't really know the whole idea of what exactly is the water village. There's about 20,000 people who still live in the water village.
Wow.
And that being said, there is still a lot of them who do not want to move into land because they believe that once they move into the land, their whole culture and identity will be stopped right there. But at the same time, a lot of identity and culture has been lost only because the younger generation have lost interest in trying to preserve what their heritage actually is. I personally, I am my background in Brunei. First of all, I'm not really a Bruneian, but I feel more Bruneian than any of the average Bruneians you'll meet. I'm a third culture kid, but apart from that, like having a community development center in the heart of the water village is one of the best things I have ever done. And just being in the water village quite a lot and meeting a lot of the people in the community, um, even for myself, I was quite shocked to see that we had um, Bruneians who were living in this position, because the village that I'm currently working in is one of the most poorest villages in Brunei. And a lot of people do not know that we have those kind of livings that is currently happening in the country as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's so fascinating because I just find it when we're talking about some of these big issues, for instance, around climate change, rising sea levels.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is imagining
Yeah.
these beautiful in cases very very old wooden homes raised on stalks in the river, but connected very closely to the ocean. And it really makes some of the issues that we're talking about very, very field communities. And how do you keep cultural connectedness, your own ways of learning and being and living alive in times where there's a lot of unprecedented change around you.
Yeah, so climate change is already starting to affect some parts of it. Brunei, the Bruneian River is quite dependent on the mangroves that we have. And we are starting to lose our mangroves now. And they try to actually have some projects to revive their mangroves quite a number of times. And it was impossible because mangroves have a very unique ecosystem where, they have to have the right kind of salination, the right kind of sand, the right kind of deposits. And it's been impossible. I think out of like 100 projects that they did, only one was a success for restoration.
That's incredible. And actually, I think we could probably learn a few things there. As in Brisbane too, we have a loss of mangroves and kind of these ecosystems. But Hayley, I'm going to switch to you quickly because I really want to hear from you. You have been involved in so many initiatives, and I met you when you were involved with the Foundation for Young Australians, and now I know that you're involved in Learning Creates Australia as well as your own projects. For you, what do you do in your everyday life, and kind of what does what does this path to now look like for you?
So I probably spend a lot of my time just talking to people who are a lot smarter than me and asking questions. That's probably the bulk of my day. No, so I guess my interest in education and social change and policy really came about because of who I am, really. Being a Darringal woman from Rockhampton, Central Queensland. So that's like an Indigenous nation here in Australia for those international viewers, as well as being a South Sea Islander woman. So again, that's my grandmother's grandfather was taken from Vanuatu and as part of the blackbird trade, which is also the slave trade that happened throughout the Pacific, where islanders were taken and forced into labour here in Australia. So I guess personally, being Indigenous and being South Sea Islander, you see the impact that policies can have on the lives of not only people of the day, but those future generations, it's something that, policies can just be changed and amended. It's based on the values of the society of the day, And so by working in this space, by working in social change space and advocacy and activism, is a way to contribute to changing some of those unjust policies and changing the intergenerational impacts that they continue to have.
That's just, it's so apt, I guess, when you're talking about the changing norms of the societies in which we operate, and in many cases, certainly across Southeast Asia as well as globally. I mean, colonization has been such a big feature of our lives and the different effects on communities. For you, what have you seen in the last few years that's been kind of maybe exciting changes? And I mean, we had Black Lives Matter last year and Indigenous Lives Matter. I think even during COVID, just the less air traffic and traffic more generally meant that we actually saw some improvements in kind of some of those environmental and climate indicators. From your kind of expertise in the areas that you work, were there any things that, given all the bad stuff, you saw some seeds of progress, perhaps?
I think what was interesting about last year was that unfortunately, it took that, but the world was united through a pandemic. People were having a shared experience. And so when the horrific murder of George Floyd happened in the US, I feel like everyone was able to tune in to that cause and to listen actually to the voices of the people impacted in demanding justice. And, that same fight for Indigenous lives and stopping Aboriginal deaths in custody has been an issue that communities have campaigned for so long in this country, since the 70s, 80s, 90s, you know, for a very long time. But it took that moment of, you know, I guess, yeah, being connected internationally around a common cause to really put that global spotlight on the issues that happen right here in this country. So I think that was positive that we are seeing that national, it forced a national conversation, you know, that international pressure.
Yeah, completely. And I think, you know, if there's one thing that's come out of this last year is really been, that uniting element of, well, where do we go next? And kind of this opportunity almost to look at and reflect on what happened in the past, and were there elements that maybe we didn't want and could drop and take something new into the future. And actually on that, so Tiffany, I know you work really, being the High Commissioner to Brunei Darussalam, of course, it involves representing Australian government national interests overseas, but the interests of the people too. And you said it really well at the start, connecting what we do at that foreign policy international stage level to what Australians care about, the values and the lifestyle and, you know, the things that are important to us. For you, I mean, I'd love you to walk us through. Brunei has assumed chairmanship for ASEAN this year. Firstly, maybe for our younger audience, what does that actually mean, or what does that mean for Australia, perhaps? And what are some of the issues that you expect to be made a priority this year, given the year that we've had with COVID and this need in our region to really reorientate to the future?
Wow, I love that you're asking these big questions.
Sorry.
No, it's fantastic, and it's a wonderful opportunity to sort of tease it out a bit more in more detail for the viewers. So the first point, at least, around what does ASEAN chair role mean? Each of the 10 ASEAN nations share the chairing role. So they have a secretariat led by a Secretary General in Jakarta, who happens to be a Bruneian, Nim Dok Hoi, and that rotates every 5 years. And then the chair role rotates every year. So that gives each of the ASEAN member states, the 10 countries, the opportunity to take the leadership of the agenda for the year. And that means that they lead across, there's hundreds, if not thousands of meetings that take place in any given ASEAN year. And it means that for Brunei this year, there's an additional layer of engagement, but opportunity to guide where the ASEANs take their forward agenda across. There's 3 key pillars. There's the security, economic, and then the socio-cultural and community piece. For the ASEANs, they're very keen and committed to consensus building. So as ASEAN chair, that doesn't mean that they get to dictate what happens across the year, but they do have a leadership role. And I think our discussions already identified that there are so many issues in our region and globally that don't stop at the border, that are connected. So, and the COVID pandemic is just a perfect example of that. That's an issue that is impacting on the lives and the livelihoods of each of us, but it's not stopping at any particular border. So for ASEAN as a group, what they're looking at is how do they respond to those challenges. And for Australia, that means we work with ASEAN to say, how can we support ASEAN centrality, ASEAN's key focus in the Indo-Pacific region? How can we support their agenda? How can we support them on those issues that matter to us as individual countries, but as a region? And where are the solutions? Where are the practical solutions that we can be engaged on? So for Brunei, they've set I think it's a really appropriate theme, and it actually touches in on a couple of the points we've discussed about the connecting the local to the bigger picture. And their theme is we care, we prepare, we prosper. And I think there's no more urgent time for us to be reminded about what the role of government is, and it is to care, to make sure that people feel safe and protected, have the opportunity to access good healthcare, have the opportunity to engage in activities that advance their personal interests, whether it's economic or something that they're passionate in. We prepare, we promote the framework so that that people, individuals, can pursue their interests, and work together with other countries, and then prosper. We're living in a region that has lifted millions out of poverty by working together, and it's important that we continue to do that work so that people can prosper. And by prosper, that means being able to have the livelihoods that individuals are entitled to have the work opportunities, to be able to pursue their entrepreneurial slants, to pursue their innovations. So I think it's a really useful theme to frame the ASEAN year. It all sits very neatly with our objectives in the region of promoting the international rules-based order. And that sounds like a very sort of high theory kind of concept, but in its simplest, it's the way that countries engage with each other, and the standards and the values that we set for ourselves and that each country signs up to and agrees to abide by in the region, and then in turn enabling the environment either at a country-to-country level or at a local level for people to be able to pursue their interests.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for explaining that too, because I think that sometimes in our, Australian outlook, I mean, firstly, we're quite geographically isolated. And I think there can be sometimes a tendency to really just focus on what's happening in Australia, which isn't a bad thing. And it's really important that we've got a lot of issues at home that we need to deal with. But one of the things that I'm always just, completely blown away with is just how important Southeast Asia is to us in terms of being our closest, my most direct neighbour. It's where so many of our historical ties are from in every sense, of the word. And it's also where so much of our future is. When I think about young people in the region, I think that the region has the kind of biggest population of youth in the world. And I think it's something 200 million-ish. Young people. I mean, that's just phenomenal. It's really quite amazing. And so when I hear kind of I guess governments and individuals talking about why we need more collaboration, I mean, it really, for me, it's natural that we also have to focus on, or how can we build these links between young people.
It's so true, and what I've really noticed across my diplomatic career is that each country is so different, and that's part of the joy of being a diplomat and traveling and learning more about people and their cultures and their backgrounds and histories. But at its core, the interests that each of the governments are dealing with is often very similar. How do we address the environmental issues that are facing our economies? How do we address the employment issues and create jobs and growth for our people? How do we protect their health, mental health, the welfare of our people? So yes, we all come with different perspectives and different histories and different ideas of how to do it, but the issues that we're respectively grappling with, I'm always struck by how similar they really are.
Yeah, completely. No, thank you for that. And I think, Fisha, I want to jump to you, because building on, I suppose, some of the things that Tiffany spoke about and some of the things that are kind of important to the region. I mean, you very much so work closely with communities, different communities, and you're very much so, I suppose, actually, I think you've worked across just about every level, from right down to the grassroots level to this major international organizations level. Yeah. But from your perspective, what do you see as the greatest social or environmental issues that Brunei has to grapple with? What are you worried about?
I'm worried about unemployment, to be honest, and climate change. Well, Bruneians are the highest in the Southeast Asia region who generate waste per capita. And that is very alarming, because we only have 425,000 people and we are contributing that much to the whole waste. And it's worrying because I mean, although we just recently launched the Green Protocol, I think last week, where the government has taken its measures on trying to be more green and trying to set a good example so people could follow. So I really applaud them for that. Though I really do think that we are still very, very much behind in renewable energy, in trying to run conservative programs for the sea, for the river, and even for our forests. We're very lucky that we have beautiful green forests, and a lot of it has been untouched. But that might not stay forever, you know. And also unemployment, where especially for the youth, it's very, very high. It's actually the highest in the region at this moment. It's at 9.3%, based on the last research that they did. And for a small population, that is very scary. And I have people who have PhDs and have mismatched jobs. And it's a huge struggle. So, you know, you have thousands of graduates every year, coming out of different fields and, you know, being very optimistic only to be unemployed for the next few years. And I think one of the biggest causes of that is the fact that a lot of people are very, very much dependent on government sector jobs instead of trying to work in the private sector jobs. Um, so they don't really see the value of working in the private industry, and hence why I think there's also a lack of skills that's built, because you know everybody just expects, you know, I get out of university, I just get into a government job, and that's it, my life is settled. Though that is not how it is here. A lot of them still lack a lot of skills for them to enter into a lot of other jobs, and a lot of people would just rather wait rather than, you know, get the experience of working in the private industry. And I think that is one of the biggest causes of unemployment here as well. So yeah, so those are the two things that I'm currently very, very much focused on here, and also on women entrepreneurship as well within the country, because there isn't any sort of um, direct, proper platforms for women entrepreneurs to develop and grow their businesses. And it's quite worrying for me per se, because you know we do have overall small business schemes, but it's not that accessible as well. And I just yesterday I was just having this conversation and Tiffany, and how you know it's not, we need to talk about how accessibility to all these appropriate channels should be easier, especially for people within the region. And I think it should be highlighted that, you know, considering that we are people from Southeast Asia, we should be having more potentials to actually grow our businesses, in fact. So yeah.
Yeah, actually, that's it's a really good point, and I think that a lot of different locations across Australia can resonate with some of these issues. I mean, a population of roughly 400,000, you know, that's roughly the same population as Canberra in some cases, and you know, Australia is a giant country, you know, but it is also quite geographically spread, and I think that sometimes in some communities there's a bit of an idea of, well, there's not really a market in my community, so I don't have a potential pathway. And I know lots of young people are concerned about their future career too. You know, what is going to be the jobs of the future? I mean, we know that technology is going to be important, but we also know that creativity and, you know, those critical thinking skills, communication skills, that's important too. What would you say to kind of anyone who's feeling maybe too isolated, I suppose, in their entrepreneurial journey, you know, whether maybe they don't see that as a future for themselves? Why is it a important avenue to consider, like doing it yourself?
Sorry, Elise, I think I got cut off earlier.
Oh,
so would you mind repeating that again, please?
of course. I was just going to say, you know, for those who may be feeling a bit isolated, whether it's because they're on a very small Brunei island or because they're you know, in somewhere that's rurally or regionally, you know, isolated in Australia. What would you say to them? Should they do it themselves? How can they do it themselves? Is entrepreneurship worth pursuing? Why? How do they even start?
Well, so I really believe entrepreneurship is worth pursuing for everybody, regardless of what your background is, because even if you don't end up having an enterprise, but the skills that you learn from being entrepreneurial, I feel that those have the most value even for your future. You know, you'll build the amount of competencies that you build just from being entrepreneurial is amazing. You know, from I think a lot of people don't really see the value of having this kind of skills, but I think just 2020, you know, a lot of people were having all sorts of researches on this top skills required to succeed in life, and you know, the top 10 were all entrepreneurial competencies: having resilience, having always thinking out of the box, having the courage to do things, and you just trying to be more brave. So yeah, so and to be honest, I don't see it as huge of a challenge. I think it should be much more easier in other places compared to in Brunei, to be honest, because Brunei is very, very small, and we have a very small market, and we are very much dependent on our neighbors for shopping. We're very, very dependent on our neighbors to, and so we do a lot of export import, and not a lot of things from Brunei goes out, but a lot of things come in. So I think you know, for people who are feeling isolated, you know, don't feel that you're isolated, because you have a solution for your community, and there is always something that you can offer to someone, and someone will always need it. But at the same time, it is highly important that you research and you see what is it that you need to identify and fix within your own community. I always tell people everything that you need is within your community itself. If you can't look for it, then you can be it. If you can't try and find somebody doing it, then you know, it's probably high time that you do it yourself. You know, you have that potential to do it because you've already identified the problem. I always tell people, you know, take that risk. The only thing that will happen is that in case you fail, you will have a lot of lessons and a lot of things that you have learned out of it. And, you know, at least you wouldn't feel that, oh, you know, you did a huge thing, and you know, you have regrets. So I usually tell people, do things with minimal risk. So don't go ahead and inject thousands of dollars of capital into it without having proper market research, or without properly identifying what are the issues that needs to be tackled. And I think, you know, people can start small. We have the power of technology on our hands. You know, so online businesses is the new thing. And I really believe online businesses can thrive so much better than actually having storefronts. And that is something that could apply in every economy, in every country. You know, rental is high, places, you know, to pay people's wages are high. Of course, you know, we do want to encourage people to employ people so people would not be unemployed anymore. But, you know, you could employ people to run your online businesses for you as well. And the great thing that COVID taught us was that everything could be done remotely. And, you know, we should be encouraging jobs that can be done online as well. And, you know, I know somebody who has a business here in Brunei, but her social media coordinator is all the way in Canada. So, you know, having all those kind of links, you know, it just shows the amount of potential that we can do as humans. And being entrepreneurial is just that, you know. So it's really exciting and fun when especially when you try to see how you could be tackling all these different issues in society by just being entrepreneur. You know, you could be creating so much things, and the fact that you're an entrepreneur, you can fail multiple times, but you could still be creating different ideas, you know? So there's not a problem about that, I feel.
I love that too.
Yeah.
And when we're kind of talking about social and policy change, one of the reasons why I love also talking about entrepreneurship is that across any of those things, at the heart of it, it's about seeing a problem in society and transforming it into a solution. And it's really, it's more than anything, it's a mindset. And whether you apply that to starting a business or to changing a law or to kind of pioneering a advocacy or a social campaign, it's the same thing. How can we turn something that's actually terrible in our society into something that is an opportunity to do something, to do better, to learn from, or whatever it is. And I'm going to jump to Hayley here too, because Hayley, this is kind of your life in many ways. I mean, you have started so many awesome and interesting initiatives. And what really strikes me is that you haven't waited for someone else to do it. I mean, Why did you start your initiatives yourself and not rely on someone else, instead? Because I think that sometimes there's a, tendency for us to say, oh, government can fix that, or that's big corporates' problems. But why you? Why did you do it?
Yeah, so I guess, and this is really speaking to co-founding the National Indigenous Youth Education Coalition. And I think, it's not so much, a point of like waiting around for someone else to do it, but really it was more so an act of responsibility to build on the work that has already been done in Indigenous education to date. I'm being a young person, even though I still experienced issues with my education system, I benefit from the work of so many staunch Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander education activists and people who have worked in the space for 20, 30, 40 years before me. And so the gap that I saw was the opportunity or space where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander young people can actually discuss the future of education and our role within that. And so it was really about doing action from a sense of responsibility to build on the work that's already been done and to contribute and add value in that space, really. So I think, it's like looking at, being accountable.
Yeah. No, I totally see that. And I think, for you, what would be your kind of your dream out of doing this work, and working so closely with Indigenous education systems and ways of learning, I suppose, that do transform and transcend across cultural boundaries and actually have such an important place in all facets of our society? What would be your dream that you would like to see maybe by the end of this decade when it comes to our education system?
Yeah, I'd love to see a strengthened Indigenous education system. Like in Australia, we have, government schools, but we also have a strong independent school network as well as private school network. So you can go to school, based on your religious interests or, what have you. And so I don't see why there's not room or space to have a whole education system that's completely founded on Indigenous pedagogies. And I think that's, when we talk about some of the global issues that you're talking about and the issues that young people face around climate change, we know that Indigenous young people are most impacted by this issue. We know that it's an international issue that's going to impact all young people. The future of work, that kind of like regional and remote communities, and like what does those economies look like into the future of Indigenous nation building. A lot of this comes back to, well, how do you create an education system to support that? And right now, education in Australia is still, stemming from that industrial era, where even going to school and hearing the school bell was about preparing young people to go into factories, and that's how we still educate here in Australia, actually. And we know that, well, I question if that way of doing business is still appropriate for preparing young people for these really complex futures that they're going to inherit. And I think that when you look at Indigenous ways of having a holistic worldview grounded in respect, respect for country, respect for language, respect for other cultures and diversity, these are really fundamental to our way of viewing things. I think those are incredible values that would benefit the future of Australia, but also how we build relationships in our region.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. In fact, we were doing the Australian High Commission and ourselves and a few other amazing organisations last year were involved in running a tiny literature festival in Brunei, and it was really amazing. Some of the panels there was all around Indigenous storytelling from, the rainforests of Borneo and across Southeast Asia and across Australia, from far Western Australia up to the Kimberleys, Perth and beyond. And what was so interesting, it was just, yeah, how much so we have such a distance to go in being able to integrate this into just it's just the norm.
Way of doing business.
Yeah, absolutely. And just finding how similar the kind of methods of cultural storytelling and sharing and education systems, and how really it's very intuitive, I suppose. And I think one of the things that I love about that is the fact that if we do bring people together to rethink maybe education systems across the region, or to rethink climate change, just how differently it could look if we actually considered it from, you know, our traditional learning systems and the ways of doing. So yeah, that's certainly a way that I'd like to see us go forwards. For you have worked across grassroots right up to the top. For you, I mean, we've got these two concepts, and I'm going to hear from Tiffany after this too, but we've got these two concepts of top-down leadership. So, you know, government can set an agenda and the rest of society then takes up the mantle of doing that thing, or bottom up. So, you know, communities get together and say, hey, we want to do this, and they push initiatives up like that. For you, what do you think is more effective? What would you like to, where have you seen the most change be made?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an importance in both, really. Like, you do see the impact different leadership can have on just national values or national goals, you know. Like, I still think that you need to have strong leadership that understands, you know, the will of the people, I guess you could say. But me personally, I put my eggs in the grassroots, ground up, bottom up type of way forward. And the reason why I say that is because, well, one is that governments are really the sum of their people, right? And so if you can work at the grassroots level and really create strong and cohesive and, you know, create communities that really respect and acknowledge the land that they're on, and and that, you know, you have, well, I guess in the context of Australia, you know, we have more than 200 different Indigenous nations, right, that have existed for millennia. And so I see that as, you know, we can work with our communities, with our nations, to really achieve the aspirations and goals of us, you know, regardless of the policy context or the national way forward, that we have self-determination over ourselves and our direction. I think that's the power of grassroots movements, that you can really be grounded in that local aspiration, and the way that you work is tied to your context, is tied to the land, it's tied to, you know, that local reality, you know, that makes sense. And yeah, that's why I see the power in both, but I also think that by working at the grassroots level and working with those people, then you can create a different type of sustainable change. And I think what's really important in this and is like your own sense of accountability. You know, who are you accountable for in the work that you do? And it's something that I've had to deal with, you know, when you work at different levels. You know, if you work at the local level or at regional, national, international, who do you speak for, and who keeps you in check that, you know, what you're saying and how you're acting is aligned? You know, where's your grounding? I think that's most important about making sure that you have strong community attachments, because where else do you get your authority from to speak, kind of thing.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think I want to go to you now, Tiffany, because I suppose across this whole week, you know, whether it's kind of Hayley's story and how she's been able to make change, or it's yours, Tiffany, I really want to encourage people to think that depending on your personality type, depending on your interests, your skills, you might thrive at the grassroots level. You might thrive up in government doing, agenda setting. For you, I mean, what does international policy change entail, and how do people get involved in it? Is it that you have to go through, go through a graduate program to work your way up to the top? What does it actually involve at the end of the day, being able to set that agenda on the world stage?
Thanks, Elise. It really strikes me when I'm listening to Fisha and Hayley as well, that policy, even international policy, is local. It's the issues, you articulated it so well, Elise. It's looking at the issues and the policy or the challenges that are facing our communities, and how do we address those challenges? How do we respond to them? So at a foreign policy level, at an intergovernmental level, we join at the United Nations, for example. I've represented Australia at the United Nations in negotiating sessions, and it's the same concept. It's a big problem. So in that case, it was how does the world manage equitably biological resources? And every country had a different perspective, and we all had a goal, which was to find a framework that made sense and was a just and fair and sustainable and enduring way to address the problem. We all came with our perspectives. And when you think about policy development domestically, that's very much the same. It's the same process. It's the different stakeholders come with their different perspectives, their different objectives, their different ideas about how to address or how to manage a problem. And it's government's role to hear those perspectives and try and navigate a solution or come up with a solution that addresses the range of stakeholder concerns and delivers the best outcome, not to dictate what the outcome is, but to set the framework so that in the policy implementation, the interests of Australians, when it's in international negotiations or in the domestic space, the Australian community is served. So it's really struck me that we've talked about COVID and the disruption and also of technology, but there's a real influence piece in that. Good policy is informed by ideas, and those ideas come from within government, and they come from our politicians, they come from bureaucrats, but they're all influenced by what's happening in the public space. And that public space, it used to be the town hall that people would go to and throw up their ideas and express their concerns and interests. But that's been thrown open now by technology. And COVID's just accelerated our ability to use these platforms to inject our ideas into the public discourse and use platforms. In Brunei has the second highest level of usage of any country in the world of Instagram. So Instagram is where I'm engaging on Instagram now, because I want to engage with the Australians in Brunei, but the Bruneians as well, to get that feedback, to understand what are the interests, concerns, what do you think we should be doing in relation to a particular problem. In my most recent job, I set up ran an IT project where its whole design was to get the interests of Australian exporters to feed their concerns in directly to government, and how can we work together to solve trade barriers to Australian exporters that are trying to get their place to market. So I think that that government, even that idea of a top-down approach, it's not as hierarchical as you might think. There's no monopoly on good ideas just in government. We know that the solutions to these big problems rest in the ideas generated by people, the youth, to those that have been on this planet for many decades, and everyone in between. So that's my sort of approach to policy development. And I'm happy to talk more about how I personally got here. At least if you want to, but that might be something that we throw into the answers to the questions that that the students are sharing.
Yeah, we can definitely do this, because I think yeah, and it's really interesting. I love what you were saying just then. A few years ago I was doing research on basically our international affairs, and I was talking with a lot of diplomats and ambassadors at the time, and one of them said to me, you know, we need foreign policy needs good ideas, and it needs a lot of them. And we can't be so kind of naive to think that they'll all come from the same place. You know, it's this idea of actually we really have to, whether it's going out there and it's looking at, you know, I know a lot of young people who write blogs who maybe they share their ideas on TikTok or Instagram and beyond. You know, it's kind of, well, how do you capture what people are concerned about and find a way of meaningfully responding to them too.
So when we developed our foreign policy white paper, which is our 5 to 10 year strategic settings, we did thousands of consultations out in the regions and with Australians, because for precisely that reason, we don't have the monopoly on good ideas. And if we're representing Australia overseas, we need to know what you want us to do.
Yep.
We need to know what's important to you and where we need to invest our resources.
So maybe on this note, and I'll throw this one open to all of the panel, but sometimes we know that there's a lot of barriers for young people being taken seriously. And I think even more so when it comes to, you know, senior decision-making, leadership, policy. So for the young people out there, what are your top tips in making a tangible difference if they've got an idea they want to see come to life? And should they wait around and hope things will change, or is there another way? I'll throw it open to any of you to kick us off.
I'm happy to go, given that I'm probably the oldest. And I'll throw to the people that actually really do know. So for me, that I think it's think big, start local. It's exactly as Fisha said, and as Hayley is doing. You have impact and you have power and you have ideas, and that voice is important. And I am so proud to represent a country that values that. And so it's thinking local, it's getting engaged on the things that you think are important. It's being it's doing volunteering, it's finding like-mindeds that have the same idea or the same passion for a particular issue, whether it's through your school or your community groupings. It's engaging in the sort of contest for ideas in the international in the public space. It's getting engaged, I think, on those issues and having a voice and working through the collective as well, that provides an avenue for you to have impact and have a say.
Yeah, I think it can be more right in the fact that you don't actually have to do it alone. And actually nothing really, you know, super important was done alone. We're humans. We thrive off connections and being able to build off what each other is doing and being able to bring a community along with you as you go on your journey of change, I think is really important. But what about you, Fisha? What do you reckon?
So I think, sorry, can I just confirm, we're talking about the questions in the chat box, right?
Well, not quite yet. I'm going to get to them in 1 second, but I wanted to hear, you know, what are your top tips in making a difference? You know, what are your top tips for young people?
Okay, so I was actually very, very excited reading about the questions about area to watch.
Feel free to answer that first if you want to.
No, but it actually quite relates to what you were talking about earlier on. I think how people could make a difference. I always tell people you can start small and start by yourself, because that is where the change comes. And once you start doing that change and you have ignited that within your own community, people will follow you, especially the people around you. And that is one of the biggest ways to actually initiate change. You could make a difference by doing something as small as starting something within your own household, to actually doing it in your own school, to actually doing it in your own office. It could be something as small as like, okay, from today onwards, we're not going to use any more paper to print unless it's recyclable paper. We're not going to be using any kind of plastic unless it's recyclable plastic. We're not going to be using single-use plastics, and we're only going to be bringing in reusables. So it could be from simple things as that to even, I'm not going to sit on this panel because everybody on this panel is a male. There's no gender diversity there. I'm not going to be sitting down. So it's all this little kind of initiatives that you could do to make a difference within your own communities. And you could start small. I mean, you could, one really important thing that I usually tell the youth that we're involved in when we're doing our projects is to start in your own homes. You'd be surprised with the amount of change you can initiate from your own, the different characters that you have who are living with you, and you can actually learn the feedback from them before actually kicking start in the community. Like for me, I had to do it within my group of friends first and to get feedback from them in order to know what would work. So yeah, so there's not much, but it's also learning what are the issues that needs to be tackled, whether there is a potential for you. But at the same time, it's researching the kind of things that interest you, because if you already have somebody doing that kind of initiative within your own community, then it's better for you to ride on with them and make bigger change together, because collaboration is very, very important as well, especially in the whole world of entrepreneurship, in the whole world of policy making. You need to always collaborate with other people within your own community as well. And I cannot emphasize on that enough.
And a great way to start people off too, because I think that, being able to kind of break up something small and achievable first, and then gather your supporters. And I love that, start in your home.
Yeah.
Of course, there's so much within our own homes that we wish we could change right away. So yeah. What about you, Hayley? What would be your kind of top tips or advice for young people in making the change they want?
Yeah, I think I took a little bit of a different route to Fisha. For me, it was trying to find that coalition of young people to actually start the journey for the National Indigenous Youth Education Coalition together. And so it started as a group, it started as a collective, and it started, with something that we all had ownership over. And we set a huge vision straight from the start with, we want our own Indigenous education system. And I think one of the things that perhaps I didn't fully realize getting into it is, you just have to be prepared to do the work. It's like doing the work when no one's watching, and then really stepping up when everyone is. And, we're still a volunteer-led organisation 5 years down the track. So, it's been, I think it's like staying focused on what is that long-term goal that you have, and how is I think it's like being okay with the fact that the impact you might have now might not pay off straight away. It might take that few years to get there, but how do you keep being motivated to keep working towards that. And I think another question to also that everyone should ask is, why? I know that I'm passionate about this issue, but what is the value that I add? What is my role in affecting change? Am I the right person? So one of the things that the coalition has just recently done was launch our Learn Our Truth campaign. And, that's all about trying to get Indigenous history taught in Australian schools. And so we're asking everyday Australians to spread the word of the campaign with their family and friends, so that, Indigenous people don't necessarily have to have those tough conversations all the time. It's about, finding those ways and the ways to work together towards a collective goal, really.
Super inspiring, the dedication, I suppose, to see through some of these objectives. I mean, they're lifelong goals, really, to be able to commit to. And sometimes it's just about, and we discussed this last night, actually, and, for anyone who wasn't at last night's event, we talked about, do you find your passion and pursue it, or do you find the things that really bug you and really annoy you that you really want to change? And I think in my experience, that's always been a stronger motivator. If you can see youth unemployment, and it's directly affecting maybe your family or your friends or your community, or if you can see the dire need in our community to actually teach Indigenous ways of knowing, and from different styles of education systems to even begin with, then it's really, it's kind of it's a stronger drive, I find. Like you know, you're moving away from that thing of like, that's not good enough, we can do better. And I always find that very inspiring. But now I do want to actually switch over to some of the audience questions. And I know, Fisha, you already were getting excited over some of them. And we do have one question here from Lisha, who asks, how do you encourage entrepreneurship in the community? Do school programs actually work? And what should a school entrepreneur program look like to be effective? And Fisha, maybe do you want to speak to this one first, given that you really do a lot of work in this space?
Sure. Hi, Lisha. That's actually a very interesting topic. We actually launched the Young Entrepreneur Program only for this purpose initially within the schools in Brunei. So we feel that the youth between the ages of 13 to 18 already need to have entrepreneurial competencies and leadership skills embedded into them from a young age. So by the time that they are 19 or 20, they feel much more confident with themselves. They have better ways on delivering their ideas. They will feel much more confident in trying to think out of the box, and they would have all these different kinds of skills that would basically make them more courageous. So encouraging entrepreneurship in the community, for us, how we did it was we actually created a platform where people could could run their businesses at a very, very small, minimal risk. So we used to run pop-up stores for a lot of small businesses to come and do market validation and to do R&D for their products, and to basically help them through sustaining and growing their businesses. And also at the same time, we provided them with quite a number of trainings where, you know, it helped them to actually basically grow their enterprises. And if one business model didn't work, we gave them the freedom to choose to move on to another business model at a very, very, very small cost. And that was through the concept of running pop-up stores. And school programs work. One of our biggest stakeholders in Brunei is actually the Ministry of Education. We run a lot of STEAM programs for as co-curricular activities with our local STEP center, our science, technology, entrepreneurship, I forgot what the P is. Oh, partnership center. So we just actually did one last week. So what we did was we mixed up a lot of theater into entrepreneurship, in encouraging students to do design thinking, leadership skills, trying to tell them to think out of the box and how they could do leadership through collaboration and create enterprises through collaboration. And a school entrepreneur program, I think how we do it is we do it in groups of 100, and we break them up into smaller groups, and we give them co-facilitators, and we let the students develop ideas on what they want to do, and at the same time try to talk about the entrepreneurial competencies that they wish to build on. A lot of them still, you know, they have excellent ideas, but they don't know what to do with those ideas. They want to be innovative, but what do they do with that kind of innovation? How do they reach that kind of innovation? How do they use technology to their own benefit? How do they actually use collaboration through their friends and through their network to actually reach those goals as well? So for me personally, I believe in running school programs because this is the starting at the grassroots, I feel. And by the time, because these are also the things that based on working with a lot of small businesses over the years, the feedback that a lot of them have given us was that, you know, they wish they were given this kind of opportunities and this kind of education or training when they were younger, because it would have helped them so much in trying to build a career in the future. And so yeah, so we built we created the Young Entrepreneur Project to fill in that gap, and the school programs are the best ways for you to actually initiate a lot of change within the community, because you are touching and impacting so many people at the same time. And it's amazing how one school could make a difference by becoming a model school, for example. So I hope that answers your question. And if you're trying to do that, I would suggest you to please go and do it. It'd be amazing.
And actually, if anyone's interested in this topic of kind of entrepreneurship in schools, then we are having a masterclass run tomorrow by Nicole Dyson, who's the founder of Future Anything here in Australia, which is a schools program that fits into school curriculum, but encourages and takes students through an entrepreneurial journey, starting up their own business and getting funding. And it's pretty amazing because there's been quite a few businesses started from this already. And Hayley, I did see that you maybe have something to add to this one too. And I know you've done so much cool work in this space over actually years already.
Yeah, I was just to say that definitely I think school programs work. When I was with the Foundation for Young Australians, had the chance to work on our $20 Boss program, which was an in-school entrepreneurial education program that was, mapped to the Australian curriculum for young people in ages 5 to 10. And I think what made it quite successful, I think over 5 years, we reached 180,000 young people in and around 1,500 schools the program reached, but it was delivered by the educators and it was embedded into the classroom. And we actually gave $20 to invest in young people's business ideas. And so they were actually able to start with real money. And so it was, and they made real money too. And it was really, really cool. And so now it's great to see that young change agents delivering that program now. And yeah, of course, what Nicole Dyson is doing is really incredible as well.
Yeah, well, we're definitely stay tuned for that. But one of the things that I love about that too is just the concept of you only need $20 to be able to make a difference. And in some cases, not even that. And I love, forget the name of the book I was reading a few years ago, but it was basically saying all you need is, something to sell, someone to sell it to, and some way to sell it. It comes starting a business or starting policy change or social change of any kind really just involves, having that thing that you want, someone that you can talk to or sell to or whatever, and a method of communicating and actually having that transaction happen. Hayley.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, some of the young people that were involved in that program were kids that did education via School of the Air. And so these are young people that are living on remote outstations in Australia and who did their schooling via the radio or via computer, and they're still able to create their own enterprises in those locations.
And it was super cool, actually. There was one amazing kid who was from up in the Kimberleys, I believe, somewhere northern Western Australia. And he did, I'll find the details and post it a little bit later. But basically he was sewing these beautiful beanies and they had the sign of the emu and the kangaroo on them for his local language group and kind of cultural community. And it was so beautiful because 2 years ago we did a program with the Australian High Commission in Brunei all around sustainable fashion. And I got to take this amazing beanie over and show everyone in Brunei just what this awesome, I think he was like 10 or 12 or something year-old was able to do. And that's the power actually. And it's the fact that when you actually go out there and you start something, maybe yourself as an entrepreneur or a young change maker or doer, you might not know where that's going. Perhaps that kid didn't realize just how far around the world that beanie would travel. Telling the story and on sharing the awesome work that he started, but it has, and now it's back here today. What you start is going somewhere and it will find a home. And I think it's really empowering anyone who works with schools and young people, because that is absolutely the place to start, as Fisha and Hayley said. But I've got another question from the audience and I do want to move to it. And maybe Tiffany, I'll start with you for this one, but Felicity asks, what's one topic you wish younger people were more interested in? I mean, there's a lot of things out there, but and we get this a little bit, Netflix is very tempting, TikTok, Instagram. Is there something you wish you saw young people more engaged in?
That's such a good question. And my initial reaction is that I think that this generation is so engaged. And technology has created that platform where you are engaged. And I see whenever I meet young people, whether it's in Brunei or in the other countries that I've lived and served in, or in Australia, there's this passion and engagement around the big issues like climate change and youth employment and education. I guess the one challenge that I think that really will face this time that we live in, and you are all what we refer to as digital natives now, where you've been sort of reared in this environment of information overload, is the investing time in really understanding the authenticity of the information that you're engaging with. And I think the technology has created these platforms that enable information exchange and engagement, and really demonstrates that we're all part of the one community. And just hearing you talk about the entrepreneurial education opportunities that happen in Brunei and how you could learn from that and bring lessons from Australia shows this idea that these issues are universal, and there's lessons that we can learn from each other on that. And we use technology even more so now in the context of COVID than we had to before to do that. But just really, I think it's a risk, a longer term risk to this opportunity is the proliferation of misinformation, and how do we as consumers of the information that we're seeing shared take time to really investigate and validate its authenticity without removing the opportunity for people to have a voice and have a say, and realize that their perspective is a valuable contribution to the community's approach to any of the problems that we're approaching.
Actually, we're working on, in the Policy Innovation Hub, a project right now around threats to democracy, and looking at this idea of, how critically, how much critical thinking do we apply when we're engaging with all of these platforms, whether it's Facebook, TikTok, the rest. Where do we get our media from? How can we check the veracity of that media? How can we check how correct is it, and how can we check ourselves? We know that we're living a little bit in our own bubbles, maybe now more than ever, where we're actually not able to travel, and kind of there's this term, and it was a term that was kind of popularized, I think, by Steinbeck in the US quite a while ago. But it was basically this idea of the old kind of main street on a town, in the olden days, pre-Facebook and pre the internet, you would go along the main street to access the bank, to do your shopping, to I don't know, pick up your dry cleaning, whatever it is, to do everything. And you would meet everyone from people who live on the street to those who perhaps are the banker, who are the lawyer, who are the doctor. You weren't you had the opportunity to meet every single kind of person and part of our society, whereas on the internet we can very easily only connect with and meet with and mingle with people like ourselves, which can be dangerous for checking and kind of gaining perspective on where we are in the world too.
Yeah, it's true. Because we're social creatures.
We are social creatures at the end of the day, and this is kind of where the whole collaboration over the big issues in our region is just so important.
Yeah.
But
I'd like to add on something to that. I think it's very important that the youth today are more interested in cybersecurity. We've been doing quite a number of digital literacy programs over last year until now, and we saw the amount of youngsters who have been scammed or tricked has been on a rise. So I think cybersecurity is a topic that shouldn't be taken lightly, because our lives revolve around the technology nowadays, and everything could be just stolen in just one click, because of like phishing links, or people who steal your identity could be from somewhere across half of the world. And, people are just draining out your bank accounts, and people don't understand the importance of actually learning about all these little things that could create problems in the bigger sense. So I really would like to urge the youngsters to go and have a look into cybersecurity, and not just get overexcited over links, or over links that don't that look too good to be true. Especially, nobody's going to give away 10,000 free airline tickets, or suddenly trying to give you, oh, if you click this, you'll win $1 million. So it's very important for you to fact check as well. And it's very important to just, we have technology in our hands to just maybe Google quickly and see whether it's legit or not. And also just using different kinds of social media platforms, like for example, where for example, even TikTok, where people could steal your identity and steal your personal data from there based on what you share. So it's also very, very important to know what you will be sharing, because once something is on the internet, it's out there forever for people to find. So that's it.
Completely, and a real threat, I think, too, and something that kind of I think all generations maybe could be careful with too. Really, what kind of is one thing you'd like to see more young people focused on that maybe they're not right now?
Yeah, well, I agree. Like I feel like young people are so much ahead of where I was at when I was still in high school, and consumed by Dolly magazines and girlfriend. But no, I think one thing that I would love to see more young people engage with critically is actually like local history, and understanding your local history, and applying a critical lens on how some of these historical texts are written, and thinking about, well, how has that influenced myself and my standing today, or even my views and my values, really. I think that's really important. And to build on what Tiffany and Fisher have said, finding ways you can beat your algorithm. I feel like I know that my social media is very much crafted to what I like and dislike. So I've been trying to actively follow and read things that don't necessarily agree with my views, to try and, understand where other people are coming from. Because sometimes with me, I'm just like, I just don't get it. I don't get how people can think this way. I don't understand why. And I feel like that's something that we need as well, is by understanding that history and kind of understanding how opinions or perspectives have formed over time, but trying to build relationships on those. I feel like that's kind of where we're at. We need to try and break those types of algorithms, really.
Completely. Bring back more of the main street and the old town. But before we end, I really want to kind of come back to maybe some advice or some last thoughts from all of our panelists. I think there's been some really great information today, from everything from the big issues that matter to Australia, our region, Brunei, to kind of what does it mean to make international policy, to make domestic change, to work with our local communities. What I want to know is, where can young people go to learn more or take action on the things that matter to them next? And perhaps from each of your perspectives, I'd love to hear a bit more. Perhaps Tiffany, can you expand on some of the opportunities that Australians or Bruneians can get involved in to maybe build relations between the countries, or exchange, study, and more?
Sure, thank you. Thank you so much for hosting this forum. It's been really, I've learned a lot from it today already myself. But I think that just picking up on that point, that all issues really start locally, and all ideas start locally too. And policy development, even at an international policy level, it starts locally, it starts domestically. The government's position on any particular issue that we seek to engage intergovernmentally through the UN or bilaterally with our host countries reflects the views of Australians, and it reflects the views that have been injected into that policy making machinery. And it's not static. It doesn't get to, we don't have a policy and it just sits there. It's constantly evolving and changing and reflecting the views and perspectives of Australians. The opportunity for you, and we've touched on this already, is to get engaged in the community issues, get engaged in the things that matter to you, the things that maybe irritate you are also the things that you're really going to be passionate about and be the change agent for, and create those people connections, whether it's through technology or face to face. And one of the great things that we have is the education links between our countries, and that's really been a sort of the engine room of the bilateral relationship for us. So get engaged in youth exchanges when study is and trips are returning, and they will return. We won't always be in this environment. Get engaged in things like the New Colombo Plan, or just even sort of school to school opportunities. There's a whole range of local opportunities connecting with your brethren overseas that can help inform policy and also inform our policy development domestically.
Yeah, thanks so much. And yeah, having been on the New Colombo Plan myself many a year ago, 6 years ago now, 7 years ago. Ooh. I can definitely, attest to that, being able to actually be there. There's nothing like, and I always say this, there's nothing actually like being in the room. As great as I love these digital rooms, being there in person and being able to make some of those links is just, you learn so much about yourself, but also about just how many similarities we have across cultures, and how we actually can partner together and learn differences too.
Yeah.
Fisha, Fisha, what about you? How can we get involved in your initiatives? Are there any particular opportunities that you see coming up in the future, and how can we follow where you go and all of the magic you create?
Yes, well, so far, a lot of what we do has been within the country, and a bit of it has been within the region. And I agree with Tiffany, a lot of it has been very, very local. Though I do want to offer, if anybody wants to possibly, run our programs in their own schools, or try and maybe run their own campaigns, just like how we have done, you could easily just reach out to me. And I could share with you the basics of how you could probably start it within your own community as well, like how we did. It was a matter of trying to see how we could affect change in a very small time, but on a very, very big scale. But of course, we had to do a lot of collaboration within our own local environment, especially with the local agencies that were involved in the local government as well.
Awesome. And I put a link in the chat to one of your many projects, and people can find you pretty easily online. I think you've got a great footprint. Hayley, what about from you? Aside from your own initiatives, are there any other ways that we can kind of get involved in what you're doing or follow along with the progress?
Yeah, we definitely love if people can go to www.learnourtruth.com. It's kind of more Australian based, but I feel like they're a good information on there for anyone. Or you can obviously follow the National Indigenous Youth Education Coalition. But I think at the heart, I would say my advice would be just to volunteer, but not in the tourist type of way. Like, volunteer on the issues that you're really passionate about, because I feel like if it's something that you're committed to really working on, regardless of pay or whatever, there's always a great opportunity just to get in and learn at the ground level. But there's also those types of different opportunities, there to volunteer with different youth UN processes, like what I had with the Global Education First Initiative, just to keep an eye out for, really. They kind of come up here and there, but that was really transformative, being able to actually work on a group with young people from 12 other countries and work with young people around the world on education advocacy. I think it was quite a unique experience, and it's really shaped like the way that I see things, really. So yeah, just go by what is really at the heart of what you value, and yeah, don't be afraid to work on it in your own free time or at midnight, or that's just the way these things go sometimes.
That's true. They're definitely
yeah.
at the end of the day, are something that we need to see change, and so we dedicate the hours to. But
sorry, there's also one more opportunity. I was an alumni of the ASEAN Australia Emerging Leaders Program. So I don't know if DFAT is still continuing to do that, but if there's an opportunity to join it, I would encourage you to join it, because it was such an amazing program, and I made amazing friends from it, and had such an amazing time learning about different ideas and how we're going to actually conceptualize it as well.
Completely. And the Australia-ASEAN Council is always funding more amazing programs, beyond what we're able to do here today. But you can stay in touch with our Facebook page. Just search Young Entrepreneurs and Leaders Speaker Series. And there's a pile of different resources and links, and you can look them up, and I'll post a few on the Facebook live chat too. But here, doesn't end today, so please, we would love to see you tomorrow, Thursday and Friday evenings. We've got 2 more masterclasses and then a summary wrap up, really cool event just to listen to stories from people who are doing awesome, phenomenal change in the region. We'd love to see you there. Thank you so much for your time today, and for making time to be here. And yeah, very much so looking forward to seeing all of the policy change to come. We'll be in touch with you if you are a school and you have got students who perhaps have been watching today. We'll be in touch with you to send out a teaching pack your way too. Thank you so much to all of our speakers for your time, and looking forward to collaborating again in the future. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.